Friday, everyone. It is Tracy coming to you live from Golden Dog Adventure Company headquarters. And today is our Lunch and Learn, and we have our special guest, Melanie Amarosa, who is one of our partners from Happiness for Dogs. How are you, Melanie?
Doing great, Tracy. How are you today?
Very good, thanks. I'm really glad you're joining us today. This is a really important topic. And I know you're a relatively new partner joining us, and you were at the doggy Easter egg hunt, kind of giving us a taste of all the great stuff that you offer. But there's so much more to your knowledge, and I'm really excited that we can talk about this with our community so that they can get to know you a little bit better and to understand why the conversation we're going to have today is so vital. So let's jump right into it. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your expertise, and Happiness for Dogs?
Sure thing. So back in the late 90s, I became certified as an infant massage instructor. So I was teaching parents how to massage their babies. I was a human massage therapist, and I focused on prenatal massage, so pregnant moms and all the aches and pains that come along with all of that. And I had that business. I did Reiki and energy work as well, and had that as my background. And then kind of got away from it, had to help out with a family business. And as my dog Emma started to age, and she went through partial CCL tear on one leg, a complete rupture on the other. We had TPLO surgery. She had cervical vertebrae issues. Started going through all these health issues as she aged. And I wanted to find a way to help her be more comfortable and enjoy life. So I kind of dusted off all of those old massage techniques that I had and started working with her and started taking classes and certifying in different modalities and techniques, and saw the benefits that it brought to her and wanted to bring that to everyone else that has dogs, that loves them and wants to see them be more comfortable and happy and enjoy their later years. So that is how Happiness for Dogs started.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad you started because, like I said, you're bringing a very important topic to our listeners today. And it's interesting because I was doing a little bit of research this morning on fascia and the importance in the body, thanks to Monica at Barrington Barks and Behavior, another one of our partners, who sent me some advanced information. I didn't realize that, the understanding of fascia in the body really only came to be within the last decade.
Absolutely.
Which is fascinating to me, with all these advancements in science, in the last decade, we really started to understand the importance of fascia.
So 30 years ago, we understood that fascia was a connective tissue that wrapped around muscle fibers and muscle bundles. And that's pretty much all we looked at it as. Around 2006, 2007, some really interesting studies started to come out. And they started to recognize fascia throughout the entire body and how it works. And they also started to understand that it was innervated. So it had a nervous system within it. And not only that, it was responsible for proprioception. So, which is telling our body where we're located, what kind of surface we're working on, how do we balance, where are our limbs positioned in response to the rest of our body. So we went from thinking that fascia was 5 to 7% of our overall body weight to 17% of our overall body weight. Big difference. Yeah. And because of that, we started to recognize the different types of fascia and the different jobs that they have. And we've got some visuals so that people
can. Yeah, so why don't we pop into that? Because I know you're going to make the connection for us between, what we know with humans and what we're starting to learn with canines, which is so valuable. So let me add the presentation in here. All right, excellent. So you can just cue me when you want me to go to the additional pages, and we'll go that way.
So this is what we were taught 30 years ago about what fascia looks like, that connective tissue. And it's all those little white line striations that you see. So it wraps every fiber, every vesicle, every bundle, and then the entire structure. So This was our basic understanding of fascia, and this continued for, again, up until 2006, 2007, when some of these studies really started to come out. And we'll pop to the next one.
All right.
So again, this talks about the 17% of our body weight versus the 5 to 7 that it was originally thought. It is linked with our nervous system and our neurofascial network, which is a huge deal. And it also comes in very different types and forms, depending on the job that it does. We'll move to the next one.
Okay.
So here are the 4 basic structures. You've got the superficial fascia, which has the skin, the different layers of the skin. You've got the deep fascia, which is the musculoskeletal system, tendons, cartilage, nerves, blood vessels. You've got the organs, and part of the job of the visceral is to protect the organs, lubricate the outside of them so that when the heart pumps, it doesn't abrade itself on the other structures within the body. And it keeps everything in place and stabilizes it all. And then you've got the body cavity lining, which is the innermost, one of the innermost layers other than the organs. And that lines the cavities and keeps everything in line and in its place.
I'm curious too. Did you know, just a little fact, that's something I learned this morning, that fascia does not show up in MRIs or any of the other types of scans that they do on the body. That's why the importance of it has been missed for so long. I just found that fascinating.
It's amazing, the fact that something that is such an inherent structure,
Right.
and when we do surgery, we cut through it all the time, and we don't understand the impact on the body.
Yeah.
And what happens with that. So yeah, it is not easily detected. We don't have a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, that fascinates me. And I also learned in the video I watched this morning that for the longest time, when cadavers were, when you're doing the autopsies or on cadavers, doctors, in the trainings and stuff like that, they would just move the fascia aside. They'd essentially saw it as packaging material, and they wouldn't even look at it or study it. Fascinating.
Exactly. And that is, it was just kind of like, oh, it's just there, never mind.
Yeah.
And to understand the impact that it has on our body, and that when it goes wrong, it causes a lot of issues. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll
Great.
go to the next slide.
All right.
So here are a few pictures of fascia. In the upper left-hand corner, you've got this spider web looking stuff, very glistening. That is for areas that need a lot of lubrication and movement. So the way that particular type of fascia is constructed, it allows for some movement and lubrication, which is hyaluronin is the component that provides that lubrication. Down below, you can see a structure that is a little bit more densely packed. This has less movement and is used more for connection and stabilization of, say, hips, knees, that sort of thing. Now, you mentioned cadaver studies. On the right, these are some cadaver pictures of various layers of fascia and construction of fascia. And you can see that some of it is very thin and spindly, and some of it is a really solid woven network.
Mm.
And those are designed, again, for areas of more mobility and areas of stabilization, depending on what we're working with. Now, those tightly packed areas and the interwoven thicker fiber structures are a lot harder to get movement and elasticity out of, because it's not their job to provide a lot of movement. One of the most common areas of fascia in the body for humans is called the TFL, or tensa fascia lata, which goes from the top of the hip and the greater trochanter of the hip, and it stabilizes the hip, goes all the way down the outside of your thigh, down toward your knee, and it stabilizes the leg when you're walking. So without that, we would kind of be, going like this at the hip and the knee. This really helps to stabilize that area. So it does not have great lateral movement. It allows for forward and back movement of the leg, and especially when it starts to get really tight from not keeping it stretched and worked, it has very little movement of the leg toward the outside, or lateral type movement.
Yeah, great points.
And again, here's a picture of some fascia layers within the skin. And you've got those little yellow globules that we're looking at. And that is kind of a honeycomb fascia type system that is squishy, provides stabilization to a point, but it's almost more of a shock absorbing type of fascia. Then you've got those white vertical lines in there that are meant to keep all the layers stabilized and connected to each other. And then you've got some little honeycomb type designs that are some of the posts of the collagen fiber, which is what fascia is typically made up of, is all collagen. So you've got those posts that provide sort of an I-beam structure for keeping the skin in place and connected. So, and again, as we age, we start to lose collagen, things start to go a little south because we're losing that elasticity within the fascia. Next slide. So when fascia becomes compromised, it typically is compromised due to trauma and inflammation. So impact, tears, overstretching, and those all build in inflammation, which is the body's way of stabilizing an injury so it can heal. Unfortunately, inflammation has an adverse effect on hyaluronan, and it tends to dry out the collagen fibers. And as they start to dry out, they start to stick and get glued together. And that's where we start to run into some problems. We've got reduced movement, reduced flexibility. We start running into trigger points, which are those little sore areas within the body. And we may even have referred pain. So the injury might be up in our shoulder, but because all of the fascia is connected throughout the entire body, as that area in the shoulder starts to knot up and create an issue, it's taking tissue from another area. So it might be taking tissue, say, from our hip, and it's pulling there. So even though the issue is up here, it's putting pressure down on our hip, and that's the pain that we're feeling. And oddly enough, you'll start working on the shoulder and people go, no, but the pain's in my hip. Yeah. Well, it might be, but this is what's causing it. And when you release this, the pain in the hip goes away.
Interesting.
So how do we help prevent injury for our animals and for ourselves? Movement and stretching is probably one of the foremost. Stretching, yoga, there are all kinds of doggy exercise programs out there right now that you can take advantage of. Long periods of being sedentary. And this becomes a problem with our animals as they age, because they become less and less active and they start to get less flexibility within their joints because the fascia is starting to compress and it's losing that elasticity. And that leads to a potential for injury for our dogs down the road, as well as discomfort, especially if they've got arthritis. Arthritis, again, is going to cause that inflammation, which is going to cause the collagen fiber to dry out. And now we've got more issues other than just the arthritis causing pain for our animals.
Yeah.
For those people that are out there with sport dogs and working dogs, warming up prior to exertion is key. Cooling down after exercise is key. simple stretches, making sure that if they are starting to get a tight area from a bit of an injury, that we invite movement into that area and get them relaxing and stretching and keep good circulation within that area that's been compromised. Something else that a lot of people don't look at is varying exercise routines. If we have dogs that only chase a ball or only do fast cat or only do dock diving, we tend to just focus on that as their exercise. And we don't tend to look at other types of exercise that balance the body and avoid issues for potential injury. Two of the things that we look at when we look at exercise is going to be isometric or static exercise, which is getting the dog to hold a position for a few minutes, engaging those muscles and getting them to work without inviting a lot of movement and exercise. So that's one way of building muscle tone and increasing some circulation within an area, is that static type exercise. The other is isotonic, or the contraction and extension of muscles, which is what we think of when we think of running. For humans, it's, doing curls with weights. That's a great example of contraction and extension for muscles. And the other thing is proprioception exercises. So getting our dogs on uneven, multi-textured surfaces helps keep that proprioception function focused, working, and really helps dogs as they age with their stability.
These are all fantastic examples. And, some of the things that I'm trying to figure out is how do we incorporate some of the warming up and cooling down into what we do on our adventures. Because sometimes we have a small group of people, sometimes we have a larger group of people. Would you have, and I know you've been on some of our adventures before, would you have any recommendations on quick, simple things that can be done with a larger group of people?
So one thing I like, and I know that there's some people have some controversy around sitting for their dogs, because their dogs may have compromised knees and hips. But we know that moving from that sitting to standing, or standing to down and then standing again, those are all great ways of keeping muscles built up. And if you have a dog that has an ACL or a CCL and a TPLO surgery, it involves working those knees and working that whole hip joint, which is sitting and standing. You don't want to overdo it, because we don't want to cause our animals pain, but we want to do it enough to keep them fit without being uncomfortable. So that might be shorter reps, 3 to 5 reps, instead of, for a really fit dog, doing 10 reps or 15 reps and doing that, 3 times in a row. Stretching the abdomen is really key for dogs, because dogs hold a lot of tension in that lumbar area and sacral area of their back, so the low back, from the end of the rib cage back to the tail. So one of the things that I like to see dogs do is a hip flexor exercise, where they put their front feet on an elevated surface. And again, depending on your dog's ability, it might be a little elevation, it could be a larger elevation. But in doing that, and getting them to kind of stretch their head up, we are inviting movement and stretching for the whole abdomen and those hip flexors. And one of the things that I like to do is, if you've got a dog standing nice and square, and again, you start out small and you work larger, you just don't, you don't go for the gusto right off, because that's going to cause problems for you. So getting them to stand square, and then with a treat, inviting them to move slightly forward and look up. That starts to invite movement along that whole top line, the shoulder, the hips, and stretch the stomach out. We don't want them to move their feet. We want the feet to stay stable, and we want the body to stretch. And then by lowering our hand a little bit and moving back a bit, they start to backload their weight. So, and then doing that back and forth sort of gentle movement is a great way to start to warm things up and loosen things up. And then we can ask for more of a stretch.
Oh, that's great. That's a great idea. So then what would you recommend for types of cool down? So, because pretty much people come off the trail and their dogs hop right into the car and usually snooze on the way home. Is there something that should be done in between?
They're done. Again, I like those same sort of exercises because on a walk, on an adventure, we've been doing a lot of movement. Now we want to try and get things cooled down a little bit, but we don't want to go from high activity to no activity. Right. So again, some of those gentle stretches, getting them to stand on an uneven surface so that, you know, they're standing on an elevated surface on their left leg and standing on the ground with the left. So that starts to, and then we switch it. And we're going to look at some equipment that you can have in your home, or that you can even ways of making stuff for yourself.
Oh, great.
That is really good for dogs.
Fantastic.
One other quick thing about proprioception, with my older dog, who's going to be 14 next month, I have a soft cotton stuffed bed for her that is probably 2 feet by 3 feet. And that is placed right in front of the door. So when she wants to go out, when she comes in, it's a little bit squishy, but it's not super unstable. And her body has to work in different ways to stabilize her weight when she walks across it. And when she stands at the door to go out, she's standing there, and I make her stand there for, 5-10 seconds every time, so that we keep that body working. We keep those muscles having to stabilize the body on that slightly unstable surface. It's not so unstable that I have to worry about her injuring herself, but it's a good exercise opportunity for her.
I like that example. That's a great one.
Yeah. So what do we do when stuff goes wrong with our dog? What happens if we have an older dog that's not moving as much, and we need to invite some movement into that muscle or into that fascia to keep it lubricated and working for them and stretching? So when there's an injury, we look at things like trigger point. We try and find where that knot is within the fascia and work down the layers to get it to release itself. Swedish massage is very good because it's a lot of long flowing strokes. It helps elongation, and it also helps that cross friction of the fibers. Heat is a good way to get rid of inflammation, especially in more chronic situations. We talked about friction and cross fiber work being part of Swedish massage. It can also be a standalone type of technique. Gua sha is a term that uses a sort of blade-like item. And the two ways of using it is either at a 90-degree angle to the body or at a 45-degree. And what we do is we scrape the body, or we scrape this way. And if you take kind of a thin, sharper object and you do this on the palm of your hand, it has two very different sensations. And it depends on if we're trying to be deeper, work deeper in the body, or lighter on the body. And gua sha means to scrape sand, because sometimes when we get those adhesions within the body, it can kind of feel like sand-like underneath your fingers in some cases, like all these like little tiny bumps or nodules. It also gets its name from the fact that on humans, when you do this, it kind of leaves a spotted rosy sort of look that kind of has a sand-like appearance to it, just from exciting the blood flow on the surface of the skin. So that's gua sha. Next is red light therapy, which is really good at getting into the body, helping with inflammation and helping excite that circulation and getting rid of that inflammation response that the body has. PEMF is also really good for the body for those exact same reasons, and it reaches deeper into the body than red light therapy. Pulsed electromagnetic field reaches into the body about 16 to 18 inches, where red light is, 2 to 6, depending on the system that you're working with. So it can reach deeper into the body on a thicker dog. It excites the cells and gets them to take in more oxygen and gets them to get rid of more waste. And the PEMF is a lot more involved than that, but that is kind of a 30,000 foot view of what PEMF does and why it's so beneficial for fascia. Is it really helps to get that circulation going in stagnant areas. It helps nutrients to flow into the fibers and keeps things working the way it should. And then myofascial release techniques include, but are not limited to, positional releases, fascial stretching, multi-directional releases, and unwinding type of techniques. And these are all things that, canine massage therapists like myself are trained to do. And it just depends on what's going on with the body and how the body responds to certain things, which one of these tools we work with first and foremost to help bring comfort to your animal.
Wow. So much great information here.
Yeah. And then this is just about recognizing signs of pain in your dog. So many times we look at changes in our dog's behavior as our dog getting old, or they're having an off day, or they just don't like that other dog, when really it could be a sign of pain, underlying pain that we don't recognize in our dogs. So changes in behavior, lack of interest in doing things that they used to like to do, like going for a walk, not getting up on the bed or couch the way they used to, choosing quiet spots out of the way to rest, especially for cats. That's a big one for cats. Cats will go hide. Slower to greet you at the door or to come and eat. Reactive around other people or animals, especially if that person or other animal is getting close to the area of sensitivity within their body. They're going to be more guarded about it. And moving their body so that you only pat the areas that they want you to pat, which are the areas that don't really hurt them. My female is very guarded about her knees because they cause her a lot of pain. And so that is something that, I address with her on a regular basis. And it takes me a little while to convince her that, hey, this is for your own good. And then once we get into it and I start working with her legs, then she stretches and relaxes. And the change in her is fantastic. And again, any concerns about your animal companion really needs to be addressed by your vet. Anything about their health or condition, your vet is your number one stop.
Yeah, agreed. Well, that is truly eye-opening, I have to say. There's just, you and I were talking prior to going live here, that there's just more people becoming aware of this, more education, more therapies that are available for dogs, like there are for humans. And I think, everyone just needs to look at their dog more as an athlete, because they are so active. They are so mobile. They love to play ball, play with toys. And obviously they're not looking out for their own best welfare. And it's very, very often it's hard to detect if your dog is in pain, unless some of these other signs that you mentioned, because dogs just are so resilient. They have a high, tolerance for pain. It's amazing. So
exactly. And my male Dash is a nut. He is just an athletic nut. We've done iron dog competitions. That dog will throw himself at anything that I ask of him. He's just, God bless him, he's fantastic. And when I started learning some more specific techniques, particularly the web technique, I started working with him, and I was doing an assessment, and all of a sudden I found this spot on his spine where I got a really strong shiver response.
Mm.
He was eating, he was active, he was jumping around, he was running, he was wanting to play. Normal behavior, nothing had changed for him. Yet I found this one area on his spine that was causing him some pain.
Mm.
Had no idea it was there.
Yep.
So some of those visual signs are really good, but it's not going to catch everything. And one of the people I study under suggests that about 53% of our dogs have, or animal companions have silent pain,
Mm-hmm.
pain that they suffer with that they don't indicate to us in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Which is, as someone who loves, their pets, it's scary to think about that your dog might be suffering or your cat might be suffering.
Right. And then that can potentially lead into some of the reactive behavior that we're seeing that we're mistaking potentially for something else. Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is definitely something people will be discussing here for a long time and trying to figure out how it connects to dogs. And what they can do to help them. But I'm really interested to see these different tools that you have. And I'm also interested to hear more about your services and how you can help kind of be a proactive therapy, for dogs. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about some of those static type exercises, and I've got 4 of these little pads. And I get my dog to put, 2 front feet on here if I only want them to raise up a little bit and do those stretching exercises like we talked about, leaning forward, leaning back. So we have this. I can also put these on their left side and elevate the left side. So now they're standing like this. So they have to engage all of those muscles to keep themselves steady. And again, you do this for 5 seconds at a time, 10, 15, 20. You slowly build up depending on how your dog reacts to the exercise. So this is a great little tool.
And Melanie, what's that called?
This is a Toto Fit. I think this is her. I can't remember the name of this particular. It's the Fit Pad. I don't remember if it's the Fit Pad or if this is the Fit Pad.
Well, is that like a hard rubber or is it plastic or?
It's silicone.
Okay.
And you pump it up with air. So the more pumped up it is, the harder it is and the less your dog has to work. The softer it is, the more they have to stabilize because there's a little less rigidity. So it's very customizable for your dog. As they grow with this exercise, you can start to make it more challenging for them. So that's one option.
Okay.
And there's more, they're huge, and they won't fit on the screen. But I've got a lot of fun stuff. And if we do another adventure, I can bring some of the stuff that people can look at.
Well, we've got you as the featured expert coming up later this year, and I know you're going to deep dive into some of this stuff as well.
Yes. So we talked about proprioception, which is the body's ability to sort of read the landscape and the stability of the landscape. And what I like about this is it has a built-in curve to it. It's got all of these little fingers that squish and move so that your dog really does have to start working. And it gives them a different sensory. This one's smooth, this one's rougher. So they have to process it a bit differently. The nice thing about this is that if I really want to get crazy and challenging, I can start to put it on top of here.
Yep.
Something else that works really good, and I love this one for older dogs too, is this wedge. Oh, sorry, my screen just timed out. So we've got this wedge. It's got little bumps on the top, not as pronounced as on the yellow pad. And depending on how much I pump it up, it depends on how much the dog has to work to keep on it. So again, I can start to use this. I can pair it with this.
Yep.
So now we're asking for a lot more stability in the dog. They've got to work harder to stabilize. And we're giving them, again, that different sensory type of position. And we're also inviting some flex into the hip flexors and the abdomen, getting them to stretch that area out. Dogs that run, they reach underneath a lot and they really tense up that stomach to do that deep reach when they're digging hard. This is the opposite of that, and it invites that elongation.
Love it. It seems so simple with these things that you could have that, you could do these very easy exercises with your dog, prior to walking them in your area, going on a hike, playing
Yeah.
ball, yeah, helping them stretch just like we would normally before we would go on a run or a hike or something like that. So,
And if you don't have any of this equipment, find a hill.
yeah.
And again, we're not going to normal walk, normal speed up and down a hill. We're going to go slow. And so look for your environment and look for ways to capitalize on your environment to enrich your experience with your dog. So if I have a hill, we're going to go straight up it. We're going to turn around. We're going to come straight down. Then we're going to start doing diagonal. So we might do a shallow diagonal. We might do a steeper diagonal, depending on how the hill is and which dog I'm working. My dog Emma, because of her condition, we're not going to get as crazy. My boy Dash, we're going to look for some more challenging things. So, and I love teaching a touch command. So touch is to put your front 2 feet up on something. And now I can start doing that with different height things. So having a touch command is really beneficial when you start doing this type of work.
That's a great idea. Well, lots of fantastic information. If you guys want to learn more about Melanie and what she does at Happiness for Dogs, you can go to her website at happiness4dogs.com. And you will be learning more about her later this year. As I mentioned, she will be the featured expert, and she will be going through a lot more of the stuff that she has in detail. I know I'm going to be reaching out to you for PMF for Dakota, who's 14. And I know I had mentioned this to you before, but this is new equipment to you. So I'm anxious to get over there and take a look at it. Now, do you offer that service for dogs and humans, or just for dogs?
So I offer it for humans. I'm working on my equine certification, but I've certified in livestock and in small animals. So dogs, cats. I'm working on my friend's elderly guinea pig later on, because one of the benefits of PEMF is that it helps the body to detoxify, which is a big issue in this environment with the feed that we give our animals, the environment. There's just a lot. So it helps the body to detoxify. It can also stimulate water consumption and appetite. So animals, like livestock, it shows they get stressed out. PEMF can really help them to sort of stimulate that appetite and get them drinking water again when they're in an environment where they're more uncomfortable.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how long is the session usually?
Depending on what's going on, if it's a targeted session and we're really just going after one issue, a minimum of 15 minutes. Otherwise, it's about a half an hour, maybe 40 minutes is about the longest you would ever go.
Okay. And where do you run your sessions?
Excuse me?
Where do you run your sessions?
So I do in-home sessions because 9 times out of 10, your animal is a lot more comfortable at home.
That makes sense.
So it's easier for me to come into the home, bring the equipment. It's small, it's portable, it's easy to work with. So I prefer doing it in the home right now. It's so much more convenient for the animal, and especially older dogs that have a mobility issue. Getting them in and out of the car is more stress and strain and pain on them than anything else. So if we can limit that for them, all the better.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, that's fantastic. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in today. We appreciate it. If you have any questions for Melanie, feel free to tag us here in the video, which will be archived now in the community on our page and on YouTube. And if you want to reach out to her, happinessfordogs.com, or you can let us know and we can certainly connect you with her because she is one of our partners. So thank you, Melanie, for joining us today for this Lunch and Learn and for the fantastic information. Love it and can't wait to learn more as we get to know you a little bit better here throughout the rest of the year.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Take care.